I'm Dr. Gabriela Baez-Aventura, professor in the Department of Hispanic Studies and Deputy Director at Arte Público Press and co-director of the US Latino Digital Humanities Center here at the beautiful University of Houston. On behalf of Arte Público, recovering the US Hispanic Literary Heritage Program and USLDH, we welcome you to our second talk on US Latino Digital Humanities grants in aid. As many of you know, Arte Público Press and Recovery, two important forces in the field of US Latino studies, were founded by Dr. Nicolás Canelos, who is a recent recipient of the National Medal for the Humanities. His vision to establish the nonprofit press and the historical archival program stemmed from a social justice need to document the legacy of Latina and Latino culture, language, and literature in the United States. To date, Arte Público has published over 700 books of fiction, nonfiction, and children's literature, and Recovery has located over 1,500 newspapers and digitized thousands of records that document the presence of the Latinx people in this land that we now know as the United States. The social justice need continues to this day as we fight against the erasure of our bodies and language on a daily basis. Therefore, the need to create a center that could use these resources for digital scholarship was and is still imminent in 2024. My colleague, Dr. Carolina Villarroel, Brown Foundation Director of Research at Recovery, and I began the US Latino Digital Humanities Center 7 years ago with the generous support from the Mellon Foundation, and we are happy to report that we have made really important strides in this field. We have grown our team to include our dear Dr. Lorena Gothero as Digital Programs Manager, with many of you have worked with her. Together, we organize talks and workshops on digital humanities and social justice. We present at conferences across the US, train and mentor students from faculty from all academics levels, including K through 12, as well as community members on US Latino DH praxis, and continue to create digital projects and data sets. We have awarded over 25 grants in aid for US Latino Digital Humanities and training, and this has solidified our USLDH mission to continue working and supporting research on the US Latino written legacy. So we invite you to visit our website, artepublicopress.com, for more information, to please follow us on social media, to use the hashtag USLDH, to share information on lectures or anything related to US Latino DH. Before I introduce the presenters, we have 4 today. I just want to mention some logistics for Q&A. We invite you to type in your questions into the chat, and then at the end of all the presentations, we will open up for questions, and then our moderators, Lorena and Carolina, will ask the questions to the presenters. So without further ado, we're going to start with the first presenter today, and we're going to follow the order in which we were shared information on this event today. So we'll start with Annemarie, and Annemarie is coming to us from California State University in Dominguez Hills. Take it away, man.
I'm so grateful to the Recovery Project, to everyone who has been working with USLDH, which has been doing amazing things ever since they first came onto my radar with their Twitter hashtag, which I think was the first to mention Latinx digital humanities, not a small thing. I'm also so honored to be part of this evolution of Arte Público Press and the Recovery Project, whose work was absolutely vital to my my dissertation work. And this project illustrates the rarity of a Chicano press having survived, and the importance of that. I'm a little choked up. I apologize. It's been a bit of an emotional semester for me. But my work that I'm going to talk about today is on Marcella Trujillo, and the idea of recovering her specifically and her work. And as someone whose work prior to this has all been on the theoretical end of digital humanities, I've found as I've been doing this, not only the practical problems that so many digital humanities scholars have, but also the ones that I think are recovering our first generation of scholars, particularly presents. For example, Marcella's name changes throughout the record. So there's about 5 things you have to search in order to find her. Presses and publications that have gone out of print and not been archived, or at least not been systematically archived or digitized and the records shared, that these scholars and activists traveled around the country and with work that was done at campuses on the West Coast, in the Southwest, and in the Midwest. And finally, what I find most moving about this, and what really made me want to pick up this work, aside from a little bit of serendipity, is the sacrifice that scholars who were part of establishing Chicano studies programs. Marcella Trujillo was one of the founding scholars at the University of Minnesota's Chicana studies program, which began in 1971. And in a lot of ways, she sacrificed her own career because although although she was a founding member of the department, her documents were used in the establishment of other programs, including at UCLA, which I attended as an undergraduate. She was denied tenure at Minnesota and passed away 2 years later. So I want to particularly give a shout out because I know librarians have scholars help help scholars discover work that they've actually done and that they don't get the credit for. But Ellen, who's Holt Ware, who's the institutional archivist at the Anderson Library of the University of Minnesota, absolutely embraced this work when I went on a preliminary trip. And ended up, I hadn't realized she had continued to work on it until earlier this semester when she emailed me with a bunch of information. And also for my dear friend Jose Navarro, who unintentionally was the catalyst for this research by standing me up for dinner at the Latinx Lit and Theory Conference at Jean Jay in April of 2023. So my exposure to Trujillo's work was from her 2 poems that are in the 1979 anthology, The Third Woman. And I was doing a close reading of the No More Cookies, Please, to talk about the relationship between Chicana feminism and the anti-abortion movement and US feminism. But I realized in the process of the night before that I didn't actually know all that much about Trujillo, although I'd taught her work for quite a while. And so so in the process of this, I realized that in addition to being a poet, she was also, one of the early Chicana writers in Chicana literature. She was a linguistic scholar and activist, and is not really recognized or memorialized in digital space. This work is being done in partnership. My work is being done in partnership with Chicana por mi Raza, contributing to its more extensive digital humanities work with the help of Linda Garcia Merchant and Maria Cotera, who've been enthusiastic about this work from our early conversations on advising and distribution. I forgot to set my timer. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, despite her many accomplishments, Trujillo is not particularly known or memorialized. And in the course of trying to find materials on her frantically the night before, I of course used Google, which took her to my own website from a course I taught in 2011. It was actually my first, no, 2012, my first course at Loyola Marymount. And what I found in a blog post was a comment by her daughter. And what had happened was this blog post, without my realizing it, had become its own little memorial by her family and friends trying to share her work. And so her daughter, 3 years after my class was over, was telling us, this is who my mother was, and this is what she did. And so that this uh but when I went and looked at it, there was no record of her having received this PhD in 1981. And I worried for a long time. In fact, it looked, especially after my first visit to Minnesota, like she hadn't finished. She'd finished her dissertation, but but it hadn't been awarded, and before she passed away. As it happened, her family, her daughter, is absolutely right. She did earn it in 1981, and that was what the librarian was sharing with me. It had not been showing up, but she found her listed in the commencement program, which gave the title of it, which then helped them find it and update their records to reflect her. uh Trujillo, Lucero was a married name, and she didn't actually publish under it very much, so that was part of the problem. Her dissertation was on the socio-historical implications of the Valley metaphor in three Chicana poets. She's one of the first people to have written about Bernice Zamora, who was a contemporary of hers. She, and at the same time, she was part of the establishment of the Chicano Studies Department while she was working on her PhD. So basically, uh, I'm just, there's not a whole lot to see yet. So these slides are basically her friends and family over the course of a decade. Um, Trying to connect with each other using this little tiny blog, and other people who are trying to write about her but don't know how to find anything, and also are trying to publish, in some cases publish her work, or find a picture. And so these kind of go on and on. And the and the last one is from Christina, who is her granddaughter, and her and left her email address, which I've used in order to reach out to her. All of this is to show the the degree to which not just scholars but the families of our the families of these people that we're researching want their work memorialized, and are trying to find a way to digitize it. So my plan and I'm still currently working on it, is tracing her publications, because she published extensively, but in a number of publications that have not been digitized yet, or I only know exist because other people cited them, in the 1970s and 80s and other work. Those include those homed by Chicana por mi raza, and it also includes trying to find photographs of her, because that's, you know, important for people who want to teach her work so that they have a way for students to connect. But in addition to this kind of traditional bibliographic digitization, I also am working with her family to establish a link to this digital archive and create an kind of an alter testimonio for Trujillo, so that her family and friends can have this as an active digital space where, you know, as people want to record information about her or look for information about her, they're able to find it. Let me, and you know, this newly collected work is also going to be shared with Chicana por mi raza, which has material about and referencing Trujillo already as part of their discussion. She of course interconnects with other activists that have already been archived by them, and it's exciting to me to imagine her being taught not just as this anthologized pair of poems that managed to, you know, get into a significant anthology, but be able to be discussed as part of the Chicano movement, you know, this whole other chapter of how this Midwest program that, you know, survives to the present began, and also for us to include her among the scholars who, you know, sacrificed so much, and also to remember how many people we know, you know, including people of my own generation, who in the establishment of Chicano studies and women's studies programs were themselves denied tenure after being their labor as junior scholars essentially being used by the university. And her death at 53 is seems quite young to me. I turned 57 this year. In addition to being a scholar, Trujillo was a brilliant poet. And we're very fortunate that she was part of the Floricanto at USC that was recorded by public television there and has recently been unearthed. And so there's 8 minutes of her reading her poetry, but this is the last minute or so.
The green hangman or executioner. And the concept here is taken from T.S. Eliot and Darío, who have written poems which say that April is a cruel month. It's a cruel month of the year for the old person who can only be nostalgic about a youthful love. There is sanctuary, however, during the winter when nature cannot aid the stirring of the emotions because the green landscape is covered with snow. And I suppose I should be reading this poem in the spring because, as T.S. Eliot says, April is a cruel month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. And Darío says, y hay tiempo ido al cual el alma vuelve los nostálgicos ojos. And I entitled mine Verde Verdugo. Verde vienes a atormentar la vista que trastorna la sangre y despierta el cuerpo con nostalgia necia de recuerdos muertos. ¿Por qué no te quedaste bajo el blanco manto del invierno santo, bajo el blanco manto del invierno santo, donde yacen trozos de los sueños fuertes? ¿Por qué no te quedaste bajo el blanco manto del invierno santo, bajo el blanco manto del invierno santo, helando los brazos que claman por amor? ¿Por qué no te quedaste bajo el blanco manto del invierno santo, bajo el blanco manto del invierno santo, cubriendo los ojos que miran al sol? ¿Por qué no te quedaste bajo el blanco manto del invierno santo, bajo el blanco manto del invierno santo, ¿Por qué no te quedaste bajo el blanco manto del invierno, bajo el blanco manto del, bajo el blanco manto, bajo el blanco, bajo el blanco, bajo el bajo, el bajo? Thank you.
All right. And that I'm just going to leave it at that, because how do you follow it? And thank you so much.
That was powerful. Thank you, Annemarie. Thank you. And this is such a beautiful and powerful collaboration to have you participate and receive one of these grants in aid to extend the work of Chicana por mi Raza and to see how, you know, the digital humanities is allowing us to make visible and incorporate other ways in which these works and these archival materials can reach wider and wider audiences. I mean, this is so incredibly relevant now.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Marina del Sol, and she comes all the way from Howard University. Welcome, Marina.
Hello, welcome to me. I'm so excited to be here. As Annemarie was speaking, I guess I thought I wanted to share when I was an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, Dr. Larry Trujillo was a professor there, and he was one of those people who provided that foundation of education for me over at UC Berkeley. And when I did this project and went into the archives, I actually found recordings of him. And he was in one of the recordings. He's not in a recording I'm going to share today, but it's beautiful to see my life come full circle, and I'm so excited to be here today. I'm not going to give any shout outs because I don't want to cry, because this is so emotional for me. So I'm going to show you today my DH prototype. I'm happy to share this prototype with you as I develop it. I've kind of scaled back and curated something to show with you. And I'll put in the chat the link to it if you want to look at it. There's more on the back end that you can't see. So I'm trained as an ethnographer. I finished my PhD at UT Austin, and I'm currently the director of the Writing Across the Curriculum program at Howard University. As an ethnographer, I look at visibility and belonging with a focus on the ways in which the state attempts to create docile bodies through surveillance and social control. And in particular, I'm really interested, for me, this work that's historical ties back into just this moment we're in right now, right? This moment, this political moment is something that has recurred throughout history. It's a moment that's happened before, and we are going to get through it. So as an ethnographer, I look at social control and surveillance. I've spent many years conducting ethnographic fieldwork in Texas. This included a residential treatment center for foster children, a homeless shelter, a prison for boys, and a domestic violence shelter for families. I was also trained as a poet as an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, and I bring all of that skill set today to think about this digital project that I want to do with archival research and the creative arts, and actually arts activism. So in recent years, I've moved my attention to digital archives and technology. This project is tentatively called Carceral Systems in Chicanx Arts Activism in Texas from 1875 to 1879. It centers around archival research using the Onda Latina Digital Archive at the Benson Latin American Collection in UT Austin. I wanted to develop a project that bears witness to sociopolitical identities that are rooted in resistance and survival. Today, I'm going to show you an abbreviated version of my prototype. As I continue to develop it, I want to use infographic tools that create data visualizations and illuminate representations of police violence, the convict lease system, and crimmigration, with a focus on cultural practices and democratic processes that are a part of our lived experiences. So the archival research component of this project charts dialogue centered around citizenship. I was going to time myself and I forgot. Let me turn on my timer. So citizenship and the public-facing component of this project uses infographic tools to create data visualizations. For me, archives function as spaces that constrain the boundaries of citizenship. Creating and inhabiting the space of the archive is a political act, and creating your own archive is a protective response against erasures I have lifelong important memories of being lost in archives as I was an graduate and learned how to navigate those systems, and then being at UT in that Benson library with that incredible vast archive they have there that you can wander around in and explore. So for me, first, archives serve as important political purpose by laying claim to a space that preserves knowledge while also acting as a point of access that index future possibility, right? I see archives as being about the past, but something that points to the future we can imagine and the future that we want to call into being. Second, archives are built, sometimes with power and vast resources, and sometimes piece by piece with care. The collections within an archive reflect a series of power-imbued choices that are shaped by cultural values and beliefs about meaning and significance. And third, archives function as spaces that house collections, and those collections are formed within a network of practices and practitioners that are designed to include and omit. And they can also serve to constrain the boundaries of citizenship. And this is the context in which I've developed my project. Within this context, creating and inhabiting the space of the archive for me becomes a political act and a protective response against erasure. So this presentation considers methods for data mining and navigating archives to locate trends that draw attention to citizen writers who've collectively and individually impacted the US public sphere. For my project, I primarily am using an archive called the Onda Latino Archive, the Mexican American Experience Collection, which is housed at the Benson Library at UT Austin. This is a digital archive of audio recordings. There's 198 recordings that were produced by the Longhorn Network. It was a radio show that distributed audio content for radio stations across the Southwest. This project uses those interviews to archive and examine experiences that are related to criminal justice in Texas. The archive has many sections to it, and I data mine the archive with a specific focus on criminal justice. So you can see here, this is the slide for my project. It's a scalar project. So this project engaged technologies of recovery, including key term development, text mining, and word volubility in order to locate trends between prison activism and Chicanx cultural arts. Through grounded theory, I employed technologies of recovery to identify trends within the archive and the radio shows as I entered in the archive to find recordings that dealt with notions of citizenship and to identify themes. In order to build out the visual components of this project, I used images that I collected from the archives in the Library of Congress and the National Archives primarily. And so I'm going to give you kind of a tour of my site, and then I hope you will go to the link and take some time to look at it yourself as well. Let me check and see. Let me post that, or let me just show you the site first. All right, so this is the project. When you click on the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a menu at this point, right? In Scalar, it's possible to create paths where you click items on the screen to move among the archive interactively. In this case, I've just set it up like a traditional format on the left where there's a menu that you can navigate. I currently have 3 sections. The first section is focused on time. The second section is focused on space. And then the third section is focused on archival materials. So I'll give you a little overview of each of those sections. The first section is a timeline, and it has the theme of law, labor, and carcerality. And you can see it looks similar to a Night Lab timeline, but it's embedded within, it's a part of Scalar. And you can see here, the blue text that's bolded is where you would be able to click and go to that data point, right? And I'll explain that in the coming slides. The second section is a map. And that map is going to focus around centers that represent carcerality within experiences in Texas. So that's my map. And then the third section is going to be an archive of materials that I have curated from the Onda Latina collection. You can see at the bottom, there's two buttons that say go there. If you go to the actual page, you'll see more buttons as it goes down. So I just took a screenshot of the first 2 items so we could take a deeper look at them. All right, so this here is this is actually one of my, this is a data point, right? A media file. This is a media file, and this is a media file actually that came from the Library of Congress. And it's actually, I had one of my students was doing research on segregation, and she found this. And I was like, hey, this image is something that I'm familiar with from my project. It's of an image of the Santa Rita Housing Project that was in Austin, or that still is in Austin, Texas. But it was one of the first, it was the first public housing development in the United States. And so this is the data. It's an image in this case, and I just took an image of it, and you can see on the left, it has my metadata that you can, as the user, click on, right? You can see on the left, it has information related to the metadata, and towards the bottom, there's a term for spatial metadata, and those are the DD coordinates for the GPS, and that's going to show that that's Austin, Texas, or actually it's going to be the location for the Santa Rita housing complex. And then the second from the bottom is the DC terms temporal data. It's going to show that this was a picture from 1937, and those metadata categories are what's going to feed into my timelines and into my maps. So within this site, I've uploaded all my media, and I've decided what is important about these, what is important about whether it's a visual or an audio that I want to share, and how do I want to curate that experience? What kind of interactive stories do I want to design for the viewer? And so I'm going to use this one image and think about how I can put this in concert with other images, either within time or space, depending on how I enter the metadata. You can see here, this is the same image, and it's appearing on my map. So on this map, you're going to see here the dot. It's showing, if you click on the red dot that's in Austin, it's going to pull up that image, right? That media file. And you're going to see the description of the image that I've entered, and you're going to see the title of the image. And if you click that title, it will take you back to what I just showed you on the previous screen. And then you see the same image is occurring in the site as a part of the timeline, right? So it's showing when did this image happen in time. The second piece of data I wanted to show you was, this is I entered, it was a corrido, that it was one of the recordings, audio recordings in the Onda Latina archive. And I took a 1 minute and 13-second clip that was actually an audio recording of a corrido. And so you see that, there on that page. You can click that and hear it. And then I included a Word document that includes the translation. It includes the text, and then includes the translation as well. When you go to that audio file, it also has the ability to see how pieces of information, right, how data operates within larger pieces of data. So here you can see that image. Let me go back. Here, this audio clip is actually an annotated section of this larger audio file, Civil Rights in the Texas Police, right? And you can see that happens there at 36 seconds. It opens this 25-minute recording, and then it plays for, I don't know, like a minute. Yeah. So that is going to annotate it. Within this file, I already have 4 sections that I'm interested in, right? There's the corrido that I'm going to use as a data point. There's also the section where there's Dr. Trujillo, he discusses police crime. And then there's a section about a specific case of police brutality in McAllen, and then a case that's in San Antonio. So that is what I have to share for you today. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had get a chance to look at my site and give me some feedback.
This is so powerful, Marina. Thank you so much. Yeah, and make sure you share the site with us. And this is, I mean, this is the beauty of doing this type of work. We're getting to see all the aspects of doing digital humanities and public humanities, and the different skills that our colleagues are bringing, and different perspectives into the archival materials that we have been working with throughout, I don't know, for generations. But now this is so, oh my God, it's just incredibly powerful. I can't wait to get my hands into the file itself.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful because Annemarie was talking about the 1973 Floricanto, and that was actually also that's one of my files that's in there that I didn't show you today, and it's just so beautiful to see that other people are working within these same bodies of projects, and I'm so interested in thinking about future collaborations. Thank you for being on this beautiful journey with me.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you. Okay, now we're gonna jump to our next panelist, and the third speaker today is Diana Ruiz, and she's with the University of Washington in Seattle. So take it away, Diana.
Hi, everyone. You know, yesterday following the presentations, I was thinking, I feel so queued up. I feel so ready to enter the conversation, and I really am hoping to have a conversation here. And that just feels like the feeling I'm still writing today after these two incredible presentations. I really appreciate this whole process of this opportunity with the grant, and also how it's been structured in terms of these touch points of getting to know what other people are working on. It's not news to anyone that this type of work can be incredibly isolating, and it can be incredibly difficult to really find time to speak to others who, I mean, just this example of the same, let's say, artifact across different projects. I'm really moved by that. The title of my project is Recovering Latinx Resistance, and the way that I want to open up conversation today is with the subtitle here, on reverberations and remediations of dignity in opposition. And I'll unpack that a little bit more as we go. So I wanted to start off by telling you about how I first came to this project, and that is by my long-standing fascination with Carmelita Torres, a 17-year-old domestic worker living in Juarez, crossing the US-Mexico border into El Paso every day to work in American households, cleaning houses. And, you know, I came across this account of her, perhaps still the most thorough account of what we know about her is from David Dorado Romo's Ringside to a Revolution. And so this was something that in the dissertation I really had to just sort of set aside and come back to later. In the idea for this DH project, it's really challenged me in terms of my own methods, my own approaches, and learning to be flexible about what the project demands in terms of what I need to learn, who else I need to be in conversation with, how I need to decenter myself, all of these different ways of working a little differently than I traditionally do as a feminist media scholar, but in other ways, very much carrying a lot of the same tenets and ethos to my work as I do in my more traditional scholarly publications. So here we have just two newspaper headlines, right, from 1917, really offering a sense of the spectacular nature of a woman, right, a young woman, an auburn-haired Amazon, who led what was known as the Bath Riots. And part of what I wanted to do at the beginning here is just give a little bit of context for many of you. I am sure you know so much about this, others at least some grounding information. So the mystery around who Carmelita Torres is what really brought me to this project, to think about recovering details of her life, in particular, exploring the kind of visual culture of this moment, what still exists in archives, to better understand this incredible moment of refusal, this incredible moment in which she convinced at first on her trolley heading to a border checkpoint, delousing station, 30 other women on her trolley to refuse to go into the fumigation sanitary station. Scaling up and also including men on other trolleys coming up to the border as well, leading up to hundreds. Some reports say a few thousand. That's not consistent, but certainly several hundreds of domestic workers coming into what became that year in January of 1917, a common practice of delousing, fumigating, using really toxic chemicals that would later be used in gas baths in Nazi Germany to prepare for entry into the US. And so from what I'm already saying, you can readily see that these are difficult historical moments. And so some of this includes details that folks might find uncomfortable. But of course, in the moment that we're living in, we are not too far from this past at all. But just to note that those details are important to contextualize here. And so when it comes to this notion of, employing the recovery work in the archives, something I am familiar with in my practice as a media scholar, I just began to think a little bit more about what to do with this kind of recovery work, right? And that's where the specificity of the DH project takes hold. In particular, I wanted to be thinking about feminist notions of speculation, about the gaps, the erasures, the absences in the archives, and how to still make those generative and productive to think about their resonance today. And so as I started thinking about pitching the sense of recovering any details I could possibly find about this kind of mediated moment in which the kind of project emerges from, it also became about wanting to create connections to Latinx youth today. And so this shifted that sense of merely recovery to really thinking about reverberation. And so this is something that came up also in a separate kind of area of my research agenda, working with science and technology studies, and reverberation as a way to convey, to repeat, to transmit, to extend, the kind of variability that happens in there in the multiple kind of echoes, right, of an idea, a story reverberating with people today. As I mentioned, thinking about how to work with the absences and I'll be honest, here's some disappointments in the archives of just hoping, I'd find that kind of treasure trove I'd really been after in terms of details of her life. But moving from there, with reverberations, what kind of affective framings of archival materials might resonate with Latinx youth? And here is also coming just from my enthusiasm of extending my research into the classroom and thinking about moments in which students feel eager and ready to exceed the kinds of assignment or whatever archival holdings we're working with in class and carry that sensibility forward. So wanting to equip and make that skill set portable. This riot was so important. This moment of dignity in refusal is the spirit that I'm interested in capturing. Also part of, as I note in that third question here, the kind of affective framing of these historical events. But of course, it was a failed movement to end this practice. The practice continued into the 1950s. And so it began to also have me think about, in the wake of a second Trump administration, that sense of a kind of failure to mobilize or a sense of what to do now, that doesn't discount all of the work that has come before, right? Began to shift my focus rather than on the failure, on this accounting for dignity in opposition and the reverberations of that. And so to give you a kind of overhead view of where I take this, the question that I found most helpful in getting conversations started and in that kind of part of the project that is helping bring Carmelita Torres's story to Latinx youth today, I'm asking, when did you stand up for yourself? When did you stand up for your family? When did you stand up for your beliefs? And it was important for me to kind of test out this question in a number of ways so that not to make it too leading. And I am not trained as an ethnographer, but in also reaching out to ethnographers, being in conversation with them, really opening up myself to the vulnerability of a new skill set. I really wanted to make opportunities for the most conceptually kind of open way for young people to tell me what was on their mind and for them to be leading the conversations inspired by Carmelita's story. Concretely, the goal of this project is to have a pilot digital exhibition, which is going to be showcasing the archival materials that I found, and a storytelling platform for Latinx youth. So this is a place where I'm really interested to talk in the Q&A and to receive feedback and hear ideas. I received training in this platform Collection Builder, and I'm really interested in the ways that it can be scaled up for future collaborators. I want to be very clear that, you know, in the learning curve for myself of this DH project, I'm coming to this as an individual with a pilot here, but I imagine this is something that I would really like to get off the ground and manage, involve other people in maintaining this. So also really building off of the model of the USLDH grant of a seed grant for larger collaboration. And so one of the things that I also follows really nicely from Marina's presentation is the sense of mapping that I'm interested in. So archival work happening in El Paso and also the National Archives, and also in terms of place and space, bringing these findings, bringing these insights from the archives wherever I am. And so it's really helpful for me to think about a kind of media studies approach to the notion of a constellation, rather than the more kind of traditional bounded ways of thinking about a more comprehensive ethnography, let's say, of a specific community. I'm hoping that this platform really allows for a different scale to think about how young Latinx people are thinking about dignity in opposition. And so the affordances of this platform seem helpful for those things in particular. And big picture, why am I after this? Why did I end up here? I've said a little bit about my personal interest in the story and returning to it in a new way. But in other areas of my political commitments, of my research agenda, of who I am, I'm really interested in the ways in which public health is used as a way to traffic in xenophobia, as a way to traffic in eugenics, as a way to traffic in racialization and discrimination by design. And so a few things are sticking out to me here in terms of the notion of a delousing station amidst fears of public health crises that Mexicans were being for no reason attributed to. And so thinking about the ways in which Title 42 was resuscitated and upheld, thinking about the ways in which the health records in ICE are a place where abuse gets concealed. And what you see here in this picture on the left is an image from the press conference where Dawn Wooten, a nurse working in a Georgia ICE detention facility, was a whistleblower for the hysterectomies happening without women's knowledge, detained women's knowledge. And so there is also a way in which it's about the record keeping, the management, the planning out of the infrastructures in which these medicalized abuses are taking place. And of course, as I mentioned, in terms of young people today and shifting my orientation from a, kind of media studies engagement with scholarly peers, I want to bring this research to young people who might not have a sense of who models of resistance can be. A sense of, again, the second Trump administration on the horizon, even if it's not a total success in terms of, however folks might define that. I was about to say laws being passed, but certainly there's some limitations there too. But a way to mobilize that energy.
Oh, Diana, sorry to interrupt you, but we need to wrap up so we can move on.
Yes. So thank you for interjecting. I'm clearly very passionate. Okay, I'm gonna skip over the precedents here. So at the place specificity of this happening in El Paso has a precedent here. A lot of eugenics writing, a lot of public health scares in particular. And in particular, I wanted to also note that this practice of delousing in prisons was also deadly, right? And so the year prior, in 1916, there was a deadly explosion because of this practice being brought into prisons. And so I'll just kind of gloss through some of the images here and some of the ways that I'm thinking about working with, again, images of perpetrators, images of buildings, images that do not have the perspectives of the people going through these spaces, but rather how the kind of craft of dehumanization, humiliation was presented in this scientific kind of blueprint here, showing these spaces. And so I'll say that with certain concerns that I'm happy to talk more through in Q&A, I've arrived at an iterative, asynchronous, and ongoing modality of engaging with young people. This is happening in informal listening sessions. This is happening with people writing their stories for me to create metadata tags for. And I'll be happy to speak more about this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana, for that passionate presentation. And we're going to go ahead and jump to our last presentation so that you'll have a chance to ask questions. And so lastly, we'll have Aldo Lauria Santiago, and he's with Rutgers University in New Brunswick. So take it away, Aldo.
Okay, thank you. I should be sharing my screen. I hope you can see it.
Yes.
Yes.
Very fast. Start my timer. This project is sort of at the other end of the kind of presentations we've had so far, and pushes the envelope a little bit in terms of looking at a population that I'm part of in the US from the perspective of Puerto Rico, which is and isn't part of the US, whatever. I'm not going to have that discussion here. This is more or less what I'm going to cover. I'm going to do it very quickly. And some of this is very simple-minded because it's not kind of an in-depth intellectual piece. It's a bit of just a administrative review. And this project that was funded was originally part of a beginning an incipient project when I proposed it, and very quickly accelerated into this massive project. And that's why it's a little complicated on the administrative end. So Ismael and Ismael couldn't be here. He had some medical appointments. We've been working on the presence of Puerto Ricans in the US and New Jersey and New York and the Northeast. Ismael published a book recently on farm workers, seasonal and permanent. My first book on New York is coming out soon. And the book on New Jersey is just literally came out this week. So these are ongoing projects. Ismael and I have another book project that kind of brings in materials that we already were familiar with, and that also motivates the project that we proposed. In our motivations, we wanted obviously to encourage the use of archival records in relation to Puerto Rican migration. And also we're trying to push the envelope ourselves of the materials that we were more familiar with and versus materials that had not been used and that we were not familiar with. And that's sort of a trajectory of the last 10 years. In our own work and in general, the emphasis is on diaspora as a US-based experience, right? The movement. And at this point with this project, we're trying to focus back onto the island or the archipelago, whatever, the territory, as not just the source of the emigration, trying to emphasize the E in emigration, but also as looking at the local production of immigration processes and immigration documentation and immigration motivations and the local impacts of immigration as well. So that's one of the major points of this work. We're going to see how it works out because it's going to be complicated. We know that, and we are sampling the products of this project, right? And there is obviously an emphasis that looks at the state, the colonial state in its different modalities, U.S. named governors, named U.S. Puerto Rican named governors, and Puerto Rican elected governors in a different mode, in various modes. Can't get into that detail, right? So it covers a chronologic span that goes from the 30s through the 80s, right? And we're documenting state practices and how working class people are embedded and visual and seen through those state practices, but also I'll try to emphasize also the documenting the voices from below, right? And this is sort of traditional imagery, right, that we're very familiar with. I'm not putting here this as part of this particular project, but the context is a larger project called the Puerto Rico Archival Collaboration, and I'm not going to go into all the details. I'll share the website. It's at the bottom of this slide and at the end of the presentation. But we're placing interns. I started placing interns 2 years ago to collaborate with archives and to do work for archives and with archives and librarians that didn't have a lot of labor to help them, right? And then that just grew and grew and grew. And recently this summer, we got a major grant from the Mellon Foundation so that the digitizing project became one piece of a larger quickly growing piece. I mean, this is almost like an additional full-time job for me. So we have like 50 interns at work. And I can't get into all the details. The website has a lot of materials, including digital libraries that we already have, digital collections, guides. But what I like to highlight here are the wonderful young people that I've been able to recruit. And it's just the absolute utter privilege for me. This is a reward of working with this kind of multi-sided, multi-thing, vector thing with these interns. Puerto Rico has tremendous overeducated, underemployed talent, right? And I tried to show you all the pictures, but I don't have time for that, right? And it's literally something that develops every week. There's a new addition that we do to this thing, right? So within the collections, we're working with the Archivo General de Puerto Rico, which is the technically the National Archive of the country, which is absolutely enormous, has very few staff. The director has been very welcoming to us in all of these relationships. So we're kind of working from the inside. This is the building. Showed you a satellite photo to try to give you a sense of, I was looking for the number of square feet, but I couldn't find it quickly. So, and it's in San Juan, obviously, in Puerta de Tierra. This is Pedro Roy, the main and the only archivist that works with essentially what are billions of records and tens of thousands of boxes. So, I mean, I could rant about that piece just for like an hour, right? The setup, right? So the work of this project has been we had identified collections. We had originally, in the last 2 years, created guides to those collections with some of the interns, hoping that we would then push it further. And then this grant allowed us to do that, which is the selective digitization of migration-related documents from the Labor Department of Puerto Rico, the governor's collections, and Fomento Económico, right? And right now we're kind of stuck in Labor Department because it turns out to be very slow and that it's a lot of material, right? So, we established these flows with cameras, with saving files, and I mean, you can imagine, right? You've all had to deal with some version of this, right? This is an example of a guide for the Labor Department records that we created maybe a year and a half ago. And, that little section there, right there is 1,720 boxes. And that's just one of the pieces that we're working with to selectively digitize, right? And I keep scrolling on this, so I'm not going to show you that. These are the two interns that have been working with the support from the Arte Público project, Juliana and Victoria, and they're just using them to digitize is underutilizing their intellect in a sense, but they're also more than glad to have the source of income because it's a point of paying well as well, getting paid. And that's the thing in Puerto Rico that I explicitly reference in the Mellon Foundation budget and proposal and whatever. So there they are at work. The work has been slow. It's a massive collection. This is the guide that we created. And this is the kind of material that we're hoping to look for, right? Letters from peasants, workers, campesinos, whatever, it varies, right? Some participated in the farm labor program, others just were migrants. This is a kind of document that we're finding, but our emphasis was originally, and we're still looking for not just the state practices and the state policies, and now we're discovering also that the state managers are intellectuals themselves, including some really important women, Petromérica Payan, which we knew of. We just hadn't thought of it clearly, right, until we sort of start looking through these materials. So, and then there's a correspondence that gets sent, right? And colleague Eileen Findley had used those materials, some of these materials for a book that emphasized migrants in Michigan, but we're trying to make this public and not just part of our research, right? So the criteria for digitization is complicated. We're trying to avoid repetitional materials. I can answer questions about that. The processing of the paper is extremely time consuming. These are densely packed boxes with we're following the Archivos protocols, both for paper management and for digitization and metadata. So this is not completed. We have thousands and thousands of images that lots of lessons along the way, which I'm more than willing to share with any of you. And this is a repository for the shared repository for uploads from all the interns that are doing digitizing work, and not all of them are doing. So I went over time, but give me 10 seconds more. This only shows you the files. So later on, we're going to, with the help of the Mellon grant, we're going to add an additional intern to enhance the digitization. Ismael and I have to start paying more attention to the products. So we're going to produce a PDF, an initial PDF version, which is kind of a folio of a compendium of what we found with a very minimal introduction. And later, we're going to obviously publish this as a formal database. I don't know if through Amica or some other platform. The archive itself will incorporate these materials because we're using their system. They have a system set up, and they will be able to pass this material onto their catalog, basically their digital catalog. And we will write essays that emphasize these themes, and probably many others that we can't predict right now. So if you have a Puerto Rico related interest, let me know. And thank you very much to the Arte Público Press. If you noticed the book that I showed at the beginning, I received a very small, modest grant from Arte Público 20 years ago to start my work in New York City. And the first book, and the second is coming at some point. The original inquiry of like, where are the sources on this, started with their small grant, all right? And I'm extremely grateful. So glad to be part of this in one way or another. So there's our information and our website. So thank you.
Wow, this is so cool. Thank you, Aldo. I mean, this is amazing work that is happening in. I mean, in one of the initial ideas that we had in creating these digital humanities grants in aid was especially important in the sense that it's allowing us to help people like jumpstart these projects, because like as you saw, many of our colleagues like Aldo, Marina and Diana have said, we start with such a small project, and then all of a sudden we like open the door to that closet that it shows us that there are so many other things that are there that allow us to visualize, and then all of a sudden we realize that what we're doing is, I mean, unfortunately, on the one hand, it's not enough, but we're here to tell you that it is enough, right? That this is, our goal is that through all through this funding, that you're able to have at least one thing that you can take to show a foundation that can eventually give you more money, right? And more funding, so that, so that your project can grow. I'm so excited, so happy that Aldo's project already has that Mellon grant. You have how many interns did you say you have? 50? Imagine that. I mean, not only the work that these contributors are doing, but also the way that they're impacted by doing the work, by being in that space, by receiving that mentorship and companionship, right? As you're doing that research. I think, I mean, that for us, it has always been so fruitful and productive. So congratulations, Aldo. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the original grants in aid established by Dr. K, and also, I don't know if Clara is still here, but the founding members of the recovery program, which really, because of those grants, that laid the foundation for recovery as we now know it, as, for Latino studies. And so, and so we're building on that, we're leveraging that, and that's why we included the grants in it here. So congratulations, it's so empowering. So we're gonna go ahead and open up the space for questions. You know, feel free to write in your questions into the chat, or feel free to unmute and ask questions. And so I'll let Carolina and Caro take over from now.
Kenya, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, these presentations were incredibly inspiring, all of them, in different ways. My head feels like it's exploding. But I did want to make a comment about Diana Ruiz's comment about the Nazis and what they did with the gases. As it turns out, that's a really important reference, because actually it's the other way around. In 2017, there was a scholarly book published that explains that Hitler used the American models. So actually they learned from the Americans. It wasn't the other way around. And I think that's really important, because that is a really, you know, people don't know that. And I think it's important that the model that was used in Eastern Europe was based on the American experience. So that what happened to those people, and that resistance against the delousing or whatever they were doing to them, is really in a much greater context historically. And unfortunately, I mean, that resistance that they were able to provide it is something that says something that was not possible in Germany and in other countries. So that just blew me away. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you have other questions or follow-ups? Linda, go ahead. Still on mute.
Yeah, I know, right? The technologists who can't figure out how to turn off their mute. Amazing presentations, and it's really wonderful to see, and I do have a question. It's really wonderful to see sort of the deliverables that are beginning to occur with these projects. I mean, you see, and the types of deliverables that are sustainable, because that's always, I know that's always a goal, to create sustainable products. I guess, and this is a question for any one of you, how do you feel that the training in, you know, project development has helped you to move these projects forward?
I can briefly say that the most standout thing about this has been the support and the time, because I did not necessarily know or could have anticipated the kinds of things that I would need to figure out once I was really in it, and the kinds of changes I'd need to make, which, you know, I'm still toying with, right? Metadata categories, and should I make this a yes, no, or like, you know, once you're in the weeds, it's a very different thing, but just be able to have the time and the latitude to figure that out has been the most important part of this experience for me.
I think for me, the biggest thing has been helping me think through ethics, and think through ownership, and how I use materials. And it's something I was aware of before, but I think I was always very afraid to misuse something. And so I feel I've gained a lot of skills in finding out how do I track down who owns what, right? Who can give permission, like, and then what's the legality of it, and then what's legal is not necessarily what's ethical. So it's been a beautiful chance this year to focus on thinking about the human aspect of archives and representation and permission and consent, especially when people may no longer be living.
Yeah, it's complicated, because I've been chair and director of things in the past for years, and it still didn't prepare me for the requirements of scale. and all the in-between steps that you're familiar with in my own research, but when you take it into something that's going to become public, that involves other people, and then later has a lot of money attached that you have to spend, it's kind of daunting. And I've had to learn, we're creating a relational database that's basically an HR department to track everything from interview, who sent us the intern, to how they got paid, and monthly checks and everything along the way. And we've been at it for 6 months, and we still haven't prepared that database yet. So it's a 3.5-year project. So that's why, anyway, my biggest lesson is not reinvent the wheel. Ask people for help. Hire talent, whatever it is you can do.
Yeah, and if I might add something, in our experience as archivists and working here at the archive, it's extremely important, I know, that you are collaborating with these archives and following their standards as well. So everything can fit like a puzzle, right? And you are able to share this information because there is a common way to protocols that are followed at a national, international level, but also the nuances that each archive has, right? And I had a question related to, because thank you for the presentations and thinking about, I think that Marina, well, all of you mentioned also, but we are working with people, not just the interns and the students, but the archives are people. This is not just data. It's we're talking about lives. So one of the questions that we had was about the ethical concerns, right? Because you find these ethical concerns, like Marina said, that legal is not always the ethical thing to do. And this is something that we encounter again and again in the archive. And how do we approach it as scholars, as archivists, as librarians? So do you have any comments about that in relationship to your project? It's a big question, I know.
I think one thing we talked about in the May training is the idea of kind of tracking who's helping you along the way. And I always run over time, and I wanted to respect the time, so I didn't give a list of all the people that helped me. But in other presentations, I've been more attuned to not just remembering to appreciate and thank the people who provided foundation, but to create a list and have a written list. And I have a section in there, it's called Research Happens in Communities, that you can't see in my Scalar site, that I'm going to share. But I think that in May, talking about the way that you track who helps you and the way you think about labor, who's contributing labor, and there's physical labor, but the emotional labor that goes on.
Absolutely. I'm because of what Puerto Rico has been through, that was a major piece of, how much you pay people, how you present the relationship that is for the university. They are a contractor, independent contractor that get paid however much you tell us to pay them, and therefore disposable and therefore whatever. But the contractual end, which is often just verbal with the interns about what they can expect as they're studying and trying to make a little money. I've had people coming off of Uber drivers, guys working at Best Buy, selling electronics with two master's degrees, that kind of like, and then we're gonna bring you through and help you get back into grad school, which is the mentoring piece, which is also part of the proposal. So now with the archival material, the archivo has its own protocols, including things like social security numbers and identifiable pieces that we follow. And we expect to find things that would raise questions in those letters that we're not sure how we're going to process, right? Ismael has done a lot more of the letters in his own research in the past, but he's not reproducing the documents, right? Sometimes doesn't have to mention the name of the person when something is discussed in the book, right? I do the same thing, but in the art, the documents are a little different. I'm not sure how we're going to handle that.
And I think that raises such a good point that I've had some sense of before, but really, as all of our work is progressing in our field, is the fragility of our history and the degree to which the people who have been involved in various Latinx movements, you know, as far back as we have records for, have been trying to save these. And, you know, I've become so appreciative of the work that was done in the 70s and 80s when people were like typing up bibliographies of publications and mimeographing them. And so if we think of the ways in which our various movements and scholars and scholarship has involved trying to use the technology that they have available with. I remember listening to Maria Cotera's father at, you know, late night. I'm not even sure where we were, Albuquerque, Louisiana, who knows? Talking about, because I said, you know, how on earth did you guys stay in touch? I mean, it's really hard even now. And he said, oh, well, you always had to make sure that there was someone that worked for the government and had access to the building at night because they had free long distance service. And so people would stay up all night making phone calls and talking to each other. And I thought, oh my God, you know, this is really stuff that we need to find a way to talk about, because it is, you know, trying to use what you have. And obviously Maria Cotera's talked about, you know, the archive in the garage, you know. I mean, my dissertation advisor, Teresa McKenna, who was part of the founding of MECHA at UCLA, her archives got lost because when she was moving, she left them with one of her sisters in the garage, and they ended up getting tossed. I mean, and that's how fragile all of this is. So, yeah.
I skipped towards the end because I got carried away. Thanks for your understanding as I was presenting this. But I think of this question in terms of how I also conceived as the public programming and feedback session and getting people to engage with this particular story. I found that a lot of organizations, whether they're Latinx organizations or Latinx serving organizations, were actually very hesitant to publicly endorse an event that was centered around what some people might deem as a terrorist, as someone who was, you know, promoting violence. I mean, she's throwing rocks and she's saying, you know, it's a very dignified act of refusal, but nonetheless, you know, that inspired ways of, you know, not trying to put the project over, you know, the real kind of material infrastructures of these organizations, and to think about other ways to create opportunities for conversations that might not lead with publicly, you know, leading with something that would create any kind of precarious situation for any of these organizations or spaces.
India?
Sorry, I can't figure out how to unmute either. like everyone else has indicated, well, such loveliness. I'm so sorry I missed the first one. I was at a meeting and also yesterday's showcase. So I have two questions and I'll get to the point. My first question, because I'm always thinking as a professor of instruction, my primary task is to teach at the university level. How is it that you hope all your projects could be used in the classroom right now? Because when I was also a recipient of this marvelous grant, that was something I was constantly thinking, I was pushed to a level of achievables and deliverables that I did not imagine. It also helped that it was the pandemic, so I think I had more time to kind of focus. But but I wanted this to be used and used immediately rather than delay and say there's going to be a 10-year delay. The next question, because I noticed that for the three of you all, you cut yourselves short. What is one thing that you would have wanted to add if you'd had a little extra time about y'all's work?
I just threw a link up in. It is to the Floricanto recordings from 1973 that USC's Beckman Center has made available. And so part of what my hope is, because I'm at a teaching institution, is that and I'm a lit person, that we have these, we help each other find these recordings. And I remember the first time I saw someone I was researching, it was Betita Martinez's, something she'd written in her handwriting, and how moving it was to be able to have that connection. So there's that. I also, for me, I use a lot of like digital writing with my students, sometimes as simple as using WordPress. And because I think as people, as someone who does Chicana ethnography, I think it's important that our students like see and hear themselves on the internet. So much is coming out now or in the last 10 years to demonstrate how much of Silicon Valley is funding the rise of white nationalism in the United States, that our use of our teaching students the use of the master's tools and having them not be users on the internet, but makers. I think all of that is what we can bring into our classrooms, or at least I try to bring into mine.
I, for some reason, started looking for databases 20 years ago with teaching. And I remember one of the first ones that I found in the early internet days was the Fidel Castro speech database. I don't know how that came to be, but all his speeches are there in text transcript. So I'm very familiar with sending students for a bit of a hunt for either a specific prompt or just pick a speech and report on it and tell me whatever, some questions. So I've been waiting for more and more and more and more. And now it's just like so much. Every unit that I teach, I have multiple, maybe not all, but multiple options. And that's just fantastic. And that we also then get to create these things thinking of the student use, because that's, at least for me, it's always a subroutine in the background that besides scholars, besides research, besides the public, can a professor send their students to do this to use this material? Is that a coherent presentation for what we do? We're also processing, to link to some of the earlier themes in the presentations, which I really appreciated, the archive of the Department of Puerto Rican Studies at Rutgers, New Brunswick, which started in '68. We've selectively digitized. We have thousands of digital, and we're going to be putting that on a separate, not a separate, the same website. And it's led to discussions of what is the original ethos of our field, right? And how were the different chairs interpreting that? And even as we publish that volume on Latinos, Latinas in New Jersey, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We haven't really sat down to look at what actually happened in the department and how it's usually overlooked because it's New Jersey, right? Who pays attention to New Jersey except us? So anyway.
So my project was originally supposed to be about poetry. And so the site is over. The site today I wanted to appear polished as my human self and my identity can be. And so I tried to smooth out the site, and I made it. I made the public part just like that small little snapshot. But there's a bunch of materials that I'm still working on to add in the poetry. Raul Salinas there's lots of materials from him on the Latino archive, and so there's going to be a whole section about him and his life, and another a gentleman that wrote writs. Writ writers, and so I have to continue to expand in that. In terms of the audience for it, I feel like that originally I had thought that it could be something that's an OER that could be used with courses, right? And that could be used in courses in different disciplines, whether it's in Chicano studies or whether it's in a discipline like sociology or history. I had imagined it being that way, but what I feel is that students, when they're assigned things, need to be assigned, like I wrote a chapter or took a test on that. So I feel that I need to make some kind of instructor guide or something that would say, how would you use this in a classroom? And I think initially I thought of it as something that could be like an assigned reading, but now I think of it more like it could be a classroom activity. Like, what would it look like to use that map and just to explore the map? I think it could be so useful to think about teaching students about data and metadata, and even thinking about like their phone and selfies. So I'm thinking I would like to maybe put a part of it, like a section that has like suggested learning activities that you could do, that an instructor could do with students. But I've really struggled with the idea of a target audience and shifted around. I think initially I wanted to be something like someone could look at with their grandma. And I think I think the audience for it was myself. And I imagine I went into the archives, and when I went into the archives, I saw my grandparents. And I think that now I have to say, well, everyone's not me. What are the other people? Who wants to read this? Who wants to look at it? I would love people's feedback of what would make someone, because all the time I'll show people my links and they're like, oh, that's nice. What makes someone actually go in and start investigating deeper? Because that requires higher motivation. And the problem with interactive design is that because it's not linear, there's not a sense of, I looked at this, now there's the next step. You just have to want to explore it. So it's not as time bound. So I would be so eager if anyone could share with me, what could I do that would make you actually want to go into it and read it more deeply? Yeah, thank you.
I love those questions. I really love those questions that you just pose. And I really feel so strongly as you just started invoking your grandmother right in the archives, and the big wish that I would have for this in teaching is that it would really spark intergenerational conversations. That's something I'm really interested in. You know, one quick thing that I'll say that I didn't get to is just to give a little bit of texture to some of the themes that emerge from the conversations inspired by this story. And so I'll just list a few here that these moments of dignified opposition were about speaking Spanish in primary and secondary classrooms, about racialization in sports, about colorism, about feminism and machismo, about parents' expectations of young people, but critical examinations of Latinidad, thinking about Blackness and indigeneity, and also this question sparking young people to talk about making the decision not to resist in these really critical moments where maybe they're translating for their parents, or there are higher stakes to a moment in which they know there's discrimination happening, but they're dealing with the aftermath of not standing up in what they thought could have been a more meaningful way. So unpacking that as well. But thank you for the question.
A question?
Thank you. Let's see. What about next steps? Something we've kind of touched upon it a little bit, but can you talk about what you see as next steps for your projects? Whoever wants to chime in first.
I'll add that in finessing the metadata around these different pieces, really working on the map function, because I feel like that is part of how I want to think about, the kind of emblematic work of this story that is place bound, but speaks to so much more about mechanisms of bordering and how the story is resonating with young people in different places. And so to have the map function, maybe more so than the timeline or other things that I envision down the line, really focusing on plugging in those latitude and longitude coordinates and making that a primary data visualization on the project.
Jumping back to the question about ways to get students to engage like more deeply, Carly Crack, she's one of the technology places in Chicago, although she's an English professor. She's been experimenting with like gamification of archive stuff and like basically using kind of the rabbit hole structure in order to kind of encourage, okay, well, what if we look for something then that there's a little piece of this story on YouTube? And basically teaching students, kind of giving them somewhat guided pathways through the idea of a game to like this life narrative of someone, how, and I was thinking as we're creating these resources that either having our students think about, how would you do that? How would you lead someone through this? Because I teach at Cal State. A lot of my students, well, not a lot, a number of my students go on to teach K-12. And, so how do we bring these things? And I think, the game of hers that that I've linked to is it's really basic, but it's also it's offline right now. Of course it is, but it's this idea of, well, there's this little bit embedded in this WordPress thing, and there's this over on YouTube, and basically having students piece together. I believe this is a narrative of migration. The spider's web, but yeah, anyway, stuff, I don't know. I mean, I think having stuff digitized, it gives so many possibilities,
One thing
Go ahead, Marina.
One thing I really enjoyed about this program is it's been scaffolded. And it's scaffolded in a way too, where I felt like that I can feel accomplished, right, and positive. I get lost in the archives, and I feel I got lost in the archives. And that we had this presentation we were doing this week, and that kind of forced me back into thinking about like, how do I get out of the archives? And this is something that I struggle with. And I think that my next step is to maybe come up with some kind of scaffolded plan for myself in terms of when do I enter and exit the archives in a way that is pre-planned. So I think now I'm ready to go back. I've created my structure, my project, and now I'm ready to go back into the archives once more.
I was going to say something in a different direction, but it's at Rutgers, it's the resources and the training for this kind of project have been very slow and problematic. And I often wonder, so we've had to sort of draw on resources that we had already, creating websites and so forth, and experimenting with scanning stuff ourselves for initially for student use, for classroom use. And then, so they haven't trained us well. The big, in my case, the biggest obstacle in the flow of all of this is what platform to use. And we're still in conversations with a web designer about, is he going to design a custom one, and we're going to go with Omeka, or we're going to go with just PDFs for now. So like, I am hoping that other institutions are not like this. And I know that there's a lot of this sort of session where people get to showcase what they did and what the product is, but I'm thinking that there has to be a template, simpler, better templates for these projects for younger faculty. That I know a lot of people that want to do this kind of thing and just don't know where to start. And sometimes they get the money and they still don't know what they're doing, right? They get these little grants. And I'm thinking there has to be a more professional, like in the business world, they would do it in a different way. They would hire somebody that's an expert at everything and just train us, beginning, middle, and ending. Whereas we're all sort of scrambling for all the little pieces and all the little whatever, and let alone the that's just more of the technical. The pedagogical piece is another huge piece, but at least the technical part. So I keep looking for, like, Scalar had been on my radar for a while, and then I just forgot about it. Started looking at Omeka, and I'm still not sure how to think about, and Rutgers doesn't have a solution for us. We sort of have to make it up ourselves, right? Anyway, that might be an additional thread for this project with the funding, that to train. I don't know, I'm not sure which part is the critical piece. Because sometimes documents exist, well, they're out there, but I don't know where they are, and I don't have time to read them. I mean, and for digital project, who trained in this work? Nobody has, right? Everybody has learned it, and along the way. Oh, anyway.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I'm at Carnegie Mellon, and digital humanities at Carnegie Mellon is something that I didn't see today here, because they have another definition of it. And they're also extremely blown away by augmented reality and virtual reality and all this stuff. And it's just, yeah, I mean, I'm just fortunate to be able to be connected to the Recovery Project, because it really, you are on your own, and that's really true. They're really into, we have a scholar in the English department who has been analyzing Shakespearean texts, and all this kind of stuff. And so basically, if I want to do something about, Cuban theater in Tampa and cigar worker land, that's like nothing for them, so I feel your pain, and I'm surrounded by the technology, but I don't know how to use it, although they don't. I mean, the guy in my department who's wonderful, who's really good at the AR and the VR and all that stuff. I mean, I showed him a list of what I took away from the last time I took the workshop with our colleagues here, and he didn't go anywhere with it. Nothing. It didn't serve anybody else's interests. So you're not alone. No estás solo.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, and I was gonna say that that is exactly why we exist, right?
Yeah.
That why we
Exactly.
created this community with the US Latino Digital Humanities Center, because we saw the need years ago, the interest in our community, and that this training was not available for us, right? In the way that we needed to be available, like starting from project development, learning the tools. I mean, we didn't know how to use these tools. So we in turn went to trainings at the beginning. We created this community that we're so proud of, and we created our own training. So the grantees can have a basic training, and then we created Manos a la Obra, that is another training that we provide every year to provide the basics, and then software as we keep learning more software and provide support. That's why if you notice, we're not an organization that gives a grant and tells you, I'll see you in a year. Figure it out. We'll see the product in a year, but rather we keep in contact, and because this is a community, we dream about this as a community, or building a community to support each other. So reach out to us. We do have training. We keep growing, and we will, like Abby said yesterday, we are actively looking for more funding to provide training, to provide more granting aid, because as Gabby said, granting aids have helped build these fields of Latino studies for the recovery scholars, and now the US Latino Digital Humanities scholars. These monies are crucial for us to create these community-based scholars and community members working in this area of studies. So I think this is a good way to wrap up and say thank you, and say it again, how proud we are of all of this work, to be part of your journey, research journey, your digital journey, and to see you grow, and to think about how we think sometimes we have this small project and then grow exponentially, and to see the directions under every single one of you are going is just amazing. Also to remind you that we are a nonprofit, and we are here for you, and we're a nonprofit. Christmas is coming, buy books that help us teach our books, and that help us enormously. And
I think Marina had a comment that you want to before you
wanted to say something
before you wrap up.
No, I'll keep it with me.
And I think that we're taking, just to remember that we're here, keep in touch. We will keep promoting your projects, because like I said, we are a community, and we're promoting each other, we're sustaining each other, and we're here for you, and we will reach out again. And we will make more spaces for this kind of work, even if we don't have for the moment more grants. We will have more spaces for you to present about your work and make it available. We're very active in social media. So send us, you're publishing a new book, you're releasing your project or parts of your project. You found something that you want to share with the world, send it to us too, and so we can promote in our lists. And with that, I'm missing something, Lore?
No, I'm gonna put our email address for recovery in the chat. So
an open door workshop session. We used to have a consulting times. That's a good idea. Consulting times, and yeah, definitely we can talk about that space, and just have like what did I say? Office hours, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we had as y'all know, we had office hours for the grantees. We're looking to expand that.
Also, if you're applying for grants and you need consultants, we are invited to be consultants for grants. Think about us in that way too. It was helpful also, not just for the projects, but also for us. And that money goes into hire interns too, and students, and provide more scholarships. So it's mutual.
If you are new to this space, especially if you came to watch and this is your first time, you can ask to be added to our listserv, and that's you can just email us at apprec@central.uh.edu. We can add you there. We advertise our workshops, our trainings, our presentations, and then I had also put the YouTube site on there. These presentations will be up there as soon as possible. And then we also have previous recordings, so the previous grants and aid, as well as any presentations related to digital humanities, archiving, ethical metadata. And if you do a presentation on this topic, please send it to us and we can add it to our playlist so that we can help, as Caro said earlier, so we can help promote you and your work.
Well, thank you, everybody. This has been amazing, like always, and it's so good to share space with you. And this lifts our spirits as we continue working on this. That is more than ever so necessary. This work is so necessary. So we'll keep at it, all of us together. So it was great to see you, and we'll see you again, hopefully very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oof.